The smallest piece of paper can outweigh the sharpest sword, if it reaches the right hands at the right moment. Morning sunlight poured through the towering stained-glass windows of Blackwood Castle, painting long bands of gold across the polished stone floor of the great hall. Servants moved silently between marble columns. Royal guards stood motionless along the walls. Nobles gathered in quiet conversations before the day's council meeting began. Everything appeared peaceful. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. But beneath the polished elegance of the castle, tension lingered like an invisible storm waiting to break. Alpha King Nathan Brooks had summoned his council before departing to negotiate a military alliance with the Northern Pax. The journey would determine whether the kingdom remained secure through the coming winter. Every influential noble had arrived. Every military commander stood ready. And, as always, Beta Ryan Cooper remained only a single step behind the Alpha King. For nearly 15 years, Ryan had been Nathan's closest companion. They had trained together, fought together, won battles together. The entire kingdom believed there was no man more loyal than the king's Beta. No one questioned him. No one ever had. Charlotte Bennett certainly wasn't expected to. At 22 years old, Charlotte served as one of dozens of maids responsible for preparing the Great Hall before every royal gathering. She replaced candles before dawn, straightened embroidered table runners, collected forgotten cups after banquets. Most nobles never noticed her existence. Some had lived in the castle for years without learning her name. Charlotte never complained. Being invisible had quietly become part of her life. Yet invisibility came with one unexpected advantage. People rarely lowered their voices around someone they refused to see. She carefully adjusted silver plates along the council table while advisors entered one after another. Without drawing attention, she listened only because she happened to be nearby. A merchant discussed grain shipments. A commander complained about frozen mountain roads. Another servant whispered about the coming snowfall. Nothing unusual, until Ryan Cooper stepped away from the gathering. Charlotte watched him disappear through a side corridor usually reserved for palace staff. Moments later, another man entered through the servants' passage. He wore the plain clothing of a supply clerk. Charlotte had never seen him before. Instinctively, she kept polishing the nearest silver goblet while pretending not to notice. The stranger stopped beside Ryan. Neither man shook hands. Neither looked directly at the other. Ryan simply adjusted one leather glove. The stranger quietly replied, "They're already in position." Charlotte's hand froze for the briefest moment. Ryan answered without changing his expression, "Good. The king leaves exactly as planned." The stranger nodded once. No mistakes this time. Charlotte lowered her eyes immediately as both men separated and walked away in opposite directions. Her heartbeat became strangely heavy. They're already in position. Position for what? The conversation had lasted only seconds, yet every word echoed inside her mind. She forced herself to continue arranging the table exactly as before. Perhaps she had misunderstood. Perhaps they were discussing scouts, or border guards, or hunting parties. But something refused to settle. Ryan returned to the Great Hall wearing the same calm expression he always carried. He greeted commanders, spoke politely with advisors, even smiled at several young soldiers. No trace of anxiety, no trace of secrecy, only perfect confidence. Charlotte tried convincing herself she was imagining danger where none existed. Then she noticed something else. As Nathan Brooks entered the hall, every noble bowed respectfully. Every commander saluted. Ryan bowed as well, but for less than a second. His eyes shifted toward one of the eastern windows overlooking the castle courtyard. Not toward the king, toward the place where the royal escort would soon assemble. It wasn't the movement itself that disturbed Charlotte. It was the timing, almost as though he were silently confirming that someone outside had seen him. A cold unease settled deep inside her chest. Charlotte looked around the magnificent hall filled with the kingdom's most powerful people. Generals, judges, advisors, veteran warriors. Every one of them trusted the Beta without hesitation. She was only a maid. Even if she spoke, who would ever believe her? Yet as she quietly placed one final silver plate before the Alpha King's empty seat, one impossible thought refused to leave her mind. If Ryan Cooper had truly betrayed his king, she might be the only person in the entire castle who knew it. Sometimes, the hardest part of saving a king isn't discovering the truth. It's finding a way to tell him before the traitor realizes you know. The council meeting began exactly as it always did. Alpha King Nathan Brooks sat at the head of the long oak table, his presence commanding the room without a single raised voice. Generals discussed troop movements. Merchants negotiated grain supplies. Border lords debated trade routes before winter sealed the mountain passes. Everything appeared routine. Ryan Cooper stood faithfully behind Nathan's chair, occasionally leaning forward to whisper updates into the king's ear. Every noble trusted him. Every commander respected him. Charlotte Bennett remained nearly invisible as she quietly moved between the council members, refilling silver goblets with warm spiced tea. Her hands remained steady. Her heart did not. She replayed the conversation she had overheard only minutes earlier. They're already in position. The king leaves exactly as planned. No matter how many explanations she imagined, none of them eased the growing weight inside her chest. If she spoke openly, Ryan would hear every word. If she accused the king's most trusted beta without proof, she would almost certainly be arrested before Nathan ever listened. She needed another way. Charlotte placed another teapot onto a serving cart and quietly slipped into the adjoining pantry. The small stone room was empty. She closed the wooden door behind her and leaned against it for only a moment. Her breathing slowed. Think. There had to be a way. Her eyes landed on a stack of unused inventory slips beside a bottle of black ink. An idea formed almost instantly. Not a speech, not an accusation, just one sentence, one warning. Charlotte tore away a clean corner of parchment no larger than her palm. She dipped the quill carefully. For a brief moment, her hand hesitated. Once she wrote these words, there would be no turning back. Then she began writing. Your beta sold you out. They're in position. She stared at the message. Simple, direct, no signature, no explanation. If Nathan chose to ignore it, nothing would change. If Ryan discovered it first, everything would end before it even began. Charlotte folded the small note twice until it became almost invisible inside her hand. A knock sounded outside the pantry. Charlotte. Another maid's voice. The council needs more tea. I'm coming. She tucked the folded paper beneath the cuff of her sleeve before lifting the silver serving tray once again. When she returned to the great hall, the discussion had shifted toward travel arrangements. Nathan would depart within the hour. Ryan calmly pointed toward a large map. The eastern road remains the safest. Charlotte noticed Nathan nodding. Her pulse quickened. She approached the Alpha King's place, setting exactly as she had done hundreds of times before. No one watched a maid serving tea. No one except Ryan. For the briefest instant, she felt his eyes follow her across the room. Not suspicious, simply observant. She lowered the teapot and poured slowly into Nathan's silver cup. Steam drifted upward between them. Nathan continued listening to one of his commanders without looking at her. Charlotte gently placed a fresh linen napkin beside his plate. In one smooth motion, hidden beneath the fold of the fabric, she slipped the tiny note onto the polished silver charger. The movement lasted less than a heartbeat. Invisible, she stepped away immediately. Ryan's attention had already returned to the military map. Charlotte carried the empty teapot toward the rear of the chamber, forcing herself not to look back. Several long seconds passed. Then, Nathan reached for the napkin. He unfolded it absent-mindedly. The tiny piece of parchment slid into his hand. His eyes dropped for only an instant. He read every word. Not a single muscle in his face moved. He calmly folded the note again beneath the table and continued discussing troop deployments as though nothing unusual had happened. Charlotte almost questioned whether he had understood. Then something changed. Without interrupting the meeting, Nathan quietly reached for a different map than the one Ryan had prepared. His gaze remained calm. His voice remained steady. But for the first time that morning, the Alpha King had stopped following his beta's plan. And Ryan Cooper had no idea that one silent note from an invisible maid had just changed the fate of the entire kingdom. The most dangerous change in a plan is the one only the king understands. Nathan Brooks did not look at Charlotte again. That was the first thing she noticed. He continued the council meeting with the same measured calm he had shown since entering the great hall. His voice remained steady. His posture remained relaxed. To every noble seated around the long oak table, nothing had changed. Only Charlotte knew otherwise. The folded note had disappeared beneath Nathan's hand. Ryan Cooper still stood one step behind the king, confident and composed. unaware that his betrayal had already reached the one man he intended to destroy. Nathan placed one finger on the military map. The eastern road is too exposed. Ryan's expression did not move. Only his eyes changed. Barely. A flicker of surprise. The eastern road is the fastest route, Your Majesty. Nathan glanced toward him. It is also predictable. A few commanders nodded thoughtfully. Ryan recovered at once. Then perhaps the northern pass. No. Nathan shifted his hand toward a narrow mountain trail marked only by faded ink. We leave through the old western gate. Silence settled over the council table. The western gate had not been used for royal travel in years. Too narrow for a formal escort. Too close to the cliffs. Too difficult for an ambush. Charlotte understood immediately. He was testing the warning. Ryan folded his hands behind his back. That route has not been inspected. Nathan's tone remained calm. Then inspected. For the first time, Ryan hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. Charlotte saw it. So did Nathan. The king turned toward Captain Daniel Hayes, commander of the inner guard. Choose 12 men. Men you trust personally. Daniel bowed. At once. Ryan stepped forward. My king, I should lead the escort. Nathan looked at him for a long moment. No. The answer was quiet. Final. You will remain here and prepare the eastern route as originally planned. Charlotte's pulse quickened. Ryan's face remained controlled, but his jaw tightened slightly. A lesser observer might have missed it. Charlotte did not. Neither did the king. The council continued for another 15 minutes. Grain supplies, border patrols, winter shelters, ordinary matters spoken beneath extraordinary tension. When the meeting finally ended, nobles rose from their seats and gathered their documents. Ryan moved toward Nathan. May I speak with you privately? Nathan accepted a sealed report from Daniel without looking up. Later, Ryan stood still for 1 second too long, then bowed. As you wish. Charlotte quietly collected empty cups from the council table. She kept her eyes lowered. Invisible again. At least she hoped so. Ryan walked past her. The scent of leather and winter pine followed him. He stopped. Charlotte's hand froze around a silver goblet. You're new to the council service. His voice sounded casual. She lowered her head. I've served here for 2 years, my lord. Ryan studied her face. Have you? Yes. A brief silence passed between them. Then he smiled. Warm. Polite. Entirely false. You should be careful around powerful men. Charlotte felt cold despite the fire burning at the far end of the hall. Of course, my lord. Ryan walked away. Only after the doors closed behind him did she allow herself to breathe. Nathan had changed the route. Ryan had noticed. And now, Ryan had noticed her. Across the great hall, Nathan stood beside the western window, speaking quietly with Captain Daniel. Without turning toward Charlotte, he unfolded the note once more. His eyes moved over the 2 short sentences. Then he handed it to Daniel beneath the cover of a military report. The captain read it. His expression hardened. Do you believe her? Nathan looked toward the closed doors through which Ryan had disappeared. I believe someone expected me on the eastern road. And now, Nathan's gaze shifted toward the courtyard below. Soldiers were already preparing 2 separate escorts. One real, one false. Now we find out who moves when the wrong king takes the expected path. Far beyond the eastern wall, hidden among snow-covered trees, armed figures waited beside the road Ryan had chosen. They had been told the Alpha King would arrive before noon. They had taken their positions. They had sharpened their blades. They had prepared for certainty. What they did not know was that one quiet maid had already placed doubt into the king's hand. And doubt, in the mind of a patient ruler, was often far more dangerous than any sword. A king who survives an ambush wins a battle. A king who understands why the ambush failed begins winning the war. Snow drifted quietly across the western hills as Alpha King Nathan Brooks led a small escort through the forgotten gate of Blackwood Castle. Only 12 mounted guards rode beside him. Captain Daniel Hayes remained close to the king's horse. No royal banners flew above them. No ceremonial procession announced their departure. Everything about the journey appeared deliberately ordinary. Miles away, however, another royal carriage rolled confidently along the eastern road. The golden crest of Blackwood Castle gleamed beneath the pale winter sun. From a distance, anyone watching would believe the Alpha King sat inside. Exactly as planned. Nathan kept his eyes on the narrow mountain trail ahead. Without turning his head, he spoke quietly. Has anyone left the castle since the council ended? Daniel nodded. 3 messengers. All approved by Ryan Cooper. Nathan said nothing. The silence itself carried meaning. Far to the east, hidden among dense pine trees overlooking the main road, masked figures crouched behind fallen logs and snow-covered rocks. They had waited since dawn. Crossbows rested against their shoulders. Short swords remained hidden beneath dark cloaks. Their leader watched the approaching royal carriage with absolute confidence. He came. One assassin smiled beneath his hood. I told you the beta's information would be accurate. The leader slowly raised one hand. Wait. The carriage rolled closer. Royal guards surrounded it exactly as expected. Everything matched the plan. Then, now, a volley of arrows burst from the forest. The horses panicked. The front guard shouted warnings. Several masked attackers charged down the hillside toward the carriage. Within seconds they surrounded it. One assassin ripped open the carriage door. Nothing. The compartment was completely empty. Blankets. Supply crates. Sandbags. No Alpha King. The attack leader froze. What? Before anyone could react, horns echoed through the valley. One blast. Then another. Royal soldiers emerged from both sides of the road. Crossbows appeared above the cliffs. Hidden cavalry rode out from behind the trees. The assassins had become the ones surrounded. Drop your weapons. Captain Owen Mitchell's voice thundered across the valley. Several attackers attempted to flee. Others fought desperately. The battle lasted only minutes. When the last sword struck the frozen ground, nearly every surviving assassin had been captured alive. Back on the western trail, a lone rider galloped toward Nathan. His horse was covered in snow. The messenger dismounted immediately. They attacked, Your Majesty. Nathan looked at him calmly. The eastern road? Yes. The carriage was empty. Daniel smiled faintly. They took the bait. Nathan accepted the report. How many prisoners? 11. Dead. 3. Nathan folded the parchment. Any insignia? The messenger hesitated. None. But he reached inside his cloak. We found this. He handed over a small bronze token. Nathan examined it carefully. The front displayed no markings. Only a plain circle. He turned it over. Engraved into the back was a single symbol. A wolf's head split by a narrow vertical line. Daniel frowned. I've never seen that crest. Nathan's expression darkened. I have. The captain looked surprised. What is it? Nathan closed his hand around the token. It belonged to a mercenary company that disappeared nearly 20 years ago. They were believed to have been destroyed. Daniel looked toward the distant mountains. But someone has been paying them. Nathan nodded slowly. Or someone rebuilt them. Back inside Blackwood Castle, Ryan Cooper stood alone in his private office. A servant entered hurriedly. My lord. Ryan looked up. The eastern attack failed. For the first time that day, the perfect calm disappeared from his face. What did you say? The carriage was empty. Ryan remained completely still. His mind raced. Nathan had changed the route. No one except the council had known the original plan. Someone inside the castle had warned the king. Slowly, very slowly, Ryan began remembering every face in the great hall that morning. Generals, advisors, servants. Then one image lingered longer than all the others. A young maid quietly placing a linen napkin beside the Alpha King's plate. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He did not know her name. Not yet. But he suddenly knew exactly where to begin looking. And for the first time since the conspiracy began, Charlotte Bennett was no longer invisible. The moment a traitor begins searching for the person who warned the king, every quiet hallway becomes a hunting ground. Charlotte Bennett felt the change before anyone spoke to her. The servants' corridor looked exactly as it had that morning. Copper lamps flickered against the stone walls. Kitchen maids carried baskets of bread toward the dining hall. Footmen hurried between staircases with sealed messages tucked beneath their arms. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet everywhere Charlotte walked, someone seemed to be watching. She carried a stack of fresh linens toward the western guest rooms, keeping her pace steady and her eyes lowered. At the far end of the corridor, one of Ryan Cooper's personal guards stood beside a narrow window. He had no reason to be there. When Charlotte passed him, he looked away too slowly. She continued walking. Do not run. Do not react. Invisible people survived by pretending they had noticed nothing. She turned into the laundry room and placed the folded linens onto a long wooden table. 2 older servants were sorting royal uniforms beside the fireplace. Their conversation stopped the moment she entered. Charlotte smiled politely. Good afternoon. Neither woman answered immediately. Finally, one forced a nervous smile. Charlotte. Yes. A man came asking about you. Her hands became still. What man? He didn't give his name. The second servant lowered her voice. He wanted to know whether you served the council this morning. Charlotte looked toward the closed door. What did you tell him? Nothing. The older woman reached across the table and gently touched Charlotte's hand. But you should be careful. Charlotte thanked them before leaving through the rear passage. Her thoughts raced. Ryan knew. Perhaps not about the note. Not yet. But he knew someone inside the Great Hall had interfered, and she had become suspicious enough to investigate. When Charlotte returned to the servants' stairwell, footsteps echoed behind her. Slow. Measured. Matching hers. She turned left. The footsteps followed. She descended one flight. Still there. Her pulse quickened. At the bottom of the stairs, she deliberately dropped one folded cloth. It landed softly on the stone. She crouched to retrieve it and glanced into the polished brass plate hanging beside the wall. A reflection appeared behind her. The same guard from the corridor. He stood motionless near the staircase. Watching, Charlotte rose calmly and continued toward the kitchens. She needed to reach Nathan. But every entrance to the royal wing would be monitored. She could not simply request another audience. A maid approaching the king twice in one day would attract too much attention. As she passed the pantry, a gloved hand suddenly pulled her inside. Charlotte nearly cried out. Captain Daniel Hayes closed the door behind them. It's me. She pressed one hand against her chest. You frightened me. Good. His voice remained low. Fear keeps people alive. Charlotte looked toward the door. Ryan is watching me. We know. Daniel handed her a small sealed message. The prisoners from the Eastern Road are being questioned. One of them carried a list of castle contacts. Charlotte swallowed. Was Ryan's name there? No names. Only symbols. He lowered his voice further. But one symbol matched the ring worn by Ryan's personal secretary. Charlotte felt the danger grow suddenly real. The conspiracy extended beyond one beta. Beyond one ambush. Daniel continued. The king wants you removed from the castle until this is over. Charlotte immediately shook her head. If I disappear now, Ryan will know I warned him. Daniel studied her carefully. You understand what staying means? Yes. No. His expression hardened. It means every person loyal to Ryan may begin searching your room, following your movements, or trying to frighten you into revealing what you know. Charlotte looked down at the sealed message in her hand. Then she remembered the assassins waiting on the Eastern Road, the 11 prisoners, the mercenary token, the king who had survived because she had refused to remain silent. If I leave, she said quietly. Ryan becomes careful. Daniel nodded. If I stay, he may make another mistake. Silence settled between them. Charlotte tucked the message beneath her apron. I'll stay. Daniel did not argue. Perhaps he already knew she would. Before leaving, he gave her one final warning. From now on, trust no one wearing the beta's colors. Charlotte opened the pantry door carefully. The corridor outside appeared empty. She stepped into it. Only then did she notice something resting on the floor beside her shoe. A small black feather, tied with red thread. She had seen that symbol once before in an old servant's tale. It was not a message. It was a promise. Someone inside Blackwood Castle wanted Charlotte Bennett to understand that they knew exactly who she was. And if she spoke again, the next ambush would not be waiting for the Alpha King. The people who failed to silence the witness will eventually try to discover what the witness knows next. Night settled over Blackwood Castle beneath a sky heavy with dark winter clouds. Most of the castle had grown quiet. Kitchen fires burned lower. Servants finished their evening duties. Only the distant footsteps of the night watch echoed through the stone corridors. Charlotte Bennett carried a small basket of fresh towels toward the royal guest wing, moving with the same quiet confidence she had practiced for years. She reminded herself to appear ordinary, invisible, unimportant. Yet every instinct warned her that the castle had changed. Not because of the failed ambush, because someone was now searching for the person responsible. As Charlotte turned into the northern gallery, she noticed a familiar figure standing beside one of the narrow windows overlooking the courtyard. Ryan Cooper. He appeared completely alone. His hands rested calmly behind his back while snow drifted beyond the glass. Charlotte immediately lowered her eyes and continued walking. My lord. Ryan turned slowly. Charlotte, isn't it? She stopped. Until now, He had never known her name. Yes, my lord. I've seen you working here for quite some time. I'm honored you noticed. His smile was warm, almost fatherly. And yet, he stepped closer. I can't remember ever speaking with you. Charlotte answered carefully. There was never a reason. Ryan studied her face. Perhaps. His voice remained pleasant. Tell me, were you present during this morning's council meeting? Charlotte nodded once. I served tea. Did anything unusual happen? Her heartbeat remained steady despite the question. No, my lord. Ryan watched her for several long seconds. Then he smiled again. I suppose a maid notices very little while carrying trays. Charlotte lowered her head. I only focus on my work. Good. Ryan stepped aside. You may continue. She bowed politely before walking away without changing her pace. Only after turning the corner did she allow herself to breathe. He was testing her. Not accusing. Not yet. Testing. Meanwhile, inside the king's private study, Nathan Brooks stood before a large wooden table covered with maps, reports, and recovered evidence from the failed ambush. Captain Daniel Hayes entered carrying another sealed document. The prisoners have begun talking. Nathan looked up. What have we learned? They weren't hired directly by Ryan. Daniel unfolded the report. They received instructions through coded messages delivered by someone inside the castle. Nathan frowned. Do they know the courier? No. But every payment was authorized using the same symbol. Daniel placed the bronze token recovered from the battlefield beside the report. The split wolf crest. Nathan stared at it in silence. Then another guard knocked urgently on the study door. My king. Nathan nodded. Enter. The guard stepped inside. We searched the Eastern Gate records. And one stable worker disappeared immediately after the failed attack. Daniel exchanged a glance with Nathan. He ran. Nathan corrected him quietly. No. He was removed. Someone was already eliminating loose ends. The conspiracy reached further than they had imagined. Nathan walked toward the window overlooking the sleeping castle. If Ryan believes his plan failed because of chance, he'll wait. But if he suspects someone warned me, Daniel finished the thought. He'll hunt the witness. Nathan remained silent for a moment. Finally he spoke. Increase protection around Charlotte. Daniel hesitated. Without telling her? Especially without telling her. If she knows she's protected, she'll behave differently. And Ryan will notice. The captain nodded. It will be done. Far below, Charlotte quietly entered the servants' quarters. She carefully closed the wooden door behind her. The room appeared exactly as she had left it. Her neatly folded blankets rested on the bed. A small candle burned beside the window. Nothing seemed disturbed. Then she noticed it. Her wooden storage chest. The brass lock remained closed. But the thin layer of dust surrounding it had been wiped away. Someone had opened it. Slowly, Charlotte lifted the lid. Her clothing remained inside. So did her family photograph. Nothing had been stolen. Instead, resting neatly on top of her folded apron lay a single sheet of blank parchment. No words. No signature. No seal. Only a fresh ink stain in one corner. Charlotte understood immediately. Someone wanted her to know they had searched her room. And they wanted her to understand something even more frightening. The next time they came, they would not be looking for evidence. They would be looking for her. The truth rarely hides behind locked doors. More often, it waits behind a door no one dares to open. Captain Daniel Hayes turned the small iron key over in his hand. The number carved into its handle caught the candlelight. 17. He looked toward Charlotte Bennett. If this really opens Ryan Cooper's private storage chamber, he either made a careless mistake, or someone wanted us to find it. Charlotte considered the possibility. The messenger tried to take the envelope back. Daniel nodded. He did, which means whatever this key unlocks is important. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Daniel folded his cloak around the key. We tell no one except the king. Nathan Brooks received them inside his private study shortly after sunset. Maps still covered the large oak table. Reports from the failed eastern ambush remained scattered beside the bronze token bearing the split wolf crest. Nathan listened without interrupting as Daniel explained everything. The false messenger, the poison blade, the envelope, the key. When Daniel finished, Nathan extended his hand. The key. He studied it quietly, then looked toward Charlotte. You trusted your instincts again. She lowered her eyes. I only noticed what felt out of place. Nathan smiled faintly. And that has already saved more lives than any sword. He placed the key on the table. We open chamber 17 tonight. No announcements. No arrests. If Ryan learns we're searching, everything inside will disappear. An hour after midnight, the castle slept beneath falling snow. Only 4 people crossed the lower corridor beneath the western tower. Nathan, Captain Daniel, Charlotte, and an elderly locksmith sworn to absolute secrecy. The underground passage smelled of cold stone and old timber. Oil lamps cast long shadows across rows of forgotten storage rooms. Each heavy wooden door carried a brass number. 12, 13, 14. Finally, 17. Daniel examined the lock. No signs of forced entry. Nathan nodded toward the locksmith. Open it. The old man carefully inserted the iron key. A dull metallic click echoed through the corridor. The door slowly swung inward. Dust floated through the air. At first glance, the chamber appeared almost empty. Several wooden crates, old travel trunks, broken furniture covered with linen sheets. Charlotte stepped inside carefully. Something felt wrong. There was almost no dust on the floor. Someone had visited recently. Nathan noticed the same thing. This room is used. Daniel searched the nearest crate. Blankets. Nothing else. Another contained old riding equipment. A third held cracked pottery. Charlotte quietly walked toward the rear wall. One storage shelf leaned slightly forward. Only by a fraction. She crouched beside it. Fresh scrape marks crossed the stone floor beneath its legs. Someone had moved it. Your Majesty. Nathan joined her immediately. Charlotte pressed gently against the shelf. It shifted. Daniel stepped beside her. Together they pulled it away from the wall. Behind it stood a narrow iron door no larger than a wardrobe. No number. No handle. Only a hidden keyhole. Nathan looked at the iron key again. It wasn't meant for the storage room. It was meant for this. The key turned smoothly. The concealed door opened. Inside lay a small secret chamber. Not treasure. Not weapons. Shelves filled with leather-bound ledgers. Bundles of sealed letters. Wax stamps. Payment records. Maps marked with colored pins stretching across every border of the kingdom. Charlotte stared in disbelief. Nathan picked up the nearest ledger. His expression darkened with every page he read. Payments. Dates. Names. Supply routes. Royal schedules. Every movement of the crown had been carefully recorded months in advance. Daniel opened another ledger. My king. He looked up slowly. These payments weren't made by Ryan alone. Nathan took the document. Several noble family crests appeared beside enormous sums of gold. The conspiracy reached far beyond a single beta, far beyond Blackwood Castle itself. Charlotte carefully unfolded one final parchment resting beneath the ledgers. Unlike the others, it contained only tomorrow's date. Below it appeared one short sentence written in black ink. The witness dies before sunrise. Silence filled the hidden chamber. Nathan slowly looked toward Charlotte. For the first time since this conspiracy began, the enemy had stopped trying to kill the king first. They had decided the maid who uncovered the truth had become the greater threat. The moment an enemy decides the witness must die, the witness stops being part of the investigation and becomes the center of the war. For several long seconds, no one inside the hidden chamber moved. The final sentence remained visible beneath the trembling flame of Daniel's oil lamp. The witness dies before sunrise. Charlotte stared at the words until they blurred. Not from fear alone, from understanding. The people behind the conspiracy knew who she was. They knew she had found the key. They knew she had reached Chamber 17. And somehow, they already expected her to survive long enough to become dangerous. Nathan folded the parchment once. Then again. His movements remained calm, but the silence around him changed. It was no longer the silence of a ruler studying evidence. It was the silence of a warrior deciding how much mercy remained. We leave everything exactly as we found it. Daniel looked surprised. My king, if we remove the ledgers tonight, Ryan will know the chamber has been discovered. Nathan placed the death order back beneath the others. We need him to believe the secret remains safe. Charlotte looked toward the shelves filled with names, payments, and royal schedules. And me? Nathan met her eyes. You will appear unprotected. Daniel immediately objected. Absolutely not. Nathan raised one hand. Appear unprotected. He looked toward the captain. Not be unprotected. The plan formed quickly. Before dawn, Charlotte would return to the servants' wing as though nothing had happened. Ryan and his allies would believe their order remained active. Hidden guards would watch every corridor. No one would intervene until the attackers revealed who had sent them. It was dangerous. Too dangerous. Nathan never pretended otherwise. You may refuse. Charlotte looked at the sentence once more. The witness dies before sunrise. If I hide now, they change their plan. Nathan said nothing. If they change their plan, we lose the chance to expose the rest. Daniel frowned. You could lose your life. Charlotte looked toward him. So could someone else if they remained free. The captain had no answer. Near 3 a.m, Charlotte returned to her small room. The candle beside the window remained exactly where she had left it. The blank parchment still rested beneath her mattress. Nothing appeared disturbed. That frightened her more than another threat would have. She changed into her sleeping dress, extinguished the candle, and climbed beneath the wool blanket. Outside her room, the corridor settled into silence. 2 hidden guards waited behind the false wall near the stairwell. Daniel remained inside an empty linen closet with 3 soldiers. Nathan watched from the darkened gallery above. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. Charlotte's eyes remained open. She listened to the castle breathing. The faint wind against the window. The distant crackle of kitchen fires. The slow footsteps of a night guard. Then, silence. Too complete. The footsteps stopped. A soft metallic click came from the door. Someone was testing the lock. Charlotte closed her eyes and forced her breathing to remain slow. The door opened only a few inches. A shadow entered. Then another. Both figures wore servants' cloaks. One quietly closed the door behind them. The second approached the bed. Charlotte saw the faint outline of a cloth in his hand. Not a blade. Something meant to silence her before she could struggle. The attacker leaned closer. Charlotte waited. One step. Then another. Just before the cloth reached her face, she rolled sharply from the bed. The man cursed. The second attacker lunged toward her. The wall panel burst open. Royal guards rushed into the room. Drop your weapons. The first attacker reached inside his cloak. Daniel struck his arm aside before he could draw the hidden dagger. The second tried to escape through the window. Nathan stepped from the gallery entrance and blocked the path. The man froze. There was nowhere left to run. Within seconds, both attackers were forced to the floor and bound. Daniel searched them carefully. No official insignia. No written orders. Only identical black feathers tied with red thread. Then one guard found something else. A bronze ring hidden beneath the first man's glove. The crest engraved into its surface belonged to one of the noble families listed inside Ryan's secret ledger. Nathan studied it without expression. Take them below. The attackers remained silent. Until Charlotte noticed the older man's sleeve. A thin streak of blue wax marked the cuff. The same rare wax used to seal documents from Ryan Cooper's private office. She pointed toward it. That came from the beta's wing. The man looked at her instinctively. Only for a heartbeat. But the mistake was enough. Daniel saw it. Nathan saw it. Charlotte did too. The Alpha King stepped closer. You came here believing a maid would die quietly. His voice remained calm. Instead, you brought me the first living link between Ryan Cooper and every noble financing his betrayal. For the first time, genuine fear appeared in the attacker's eyes. The order had failed. The witness was alive. And before sunrise, the conspirators who believed Charlotte Bennett would disappear had unknowingly placed the final evidence directly into the Alpha King's hands. The strongest trap is never the one built with steel. It is the one that convinces the guilty they are still winning. Morning light spread across Blackwood Castle, but the atmosphere inside the royal court remained unusually calm. To everyone watching, life had returned to normal. Servants prepared breakfast. Royal guards rotated their posts. Messengers crossed the courtyard carrying sealed reports. Only a handful of people knew that 2 assassins had been captured during the night. Even fewer knew what had been discovered inside Chamber 17. That silence was intentional. Alpha King Nathan Brooks wanted every conspirator to believe their plan was still hidden. Inside the king's private study, Nathan stood beside the fireplace while Captain Daniel Hayes arranged several documents across a large oak table. Charlotte Bennett remained quietly near the window. Nathan looked at the ledgers recovered from the hidden chamber. They'll realize the attack failed. Daniel nodded. But they must never realize we found these. Nathan closed one ledger. Exactly. He turned toward Charlotte. They already believe you're still alive because of chance. If they continue believing that, they'll try again. Charlotte understood immediately. And every attempt exposes another piece of the network. Nathan smiled faintly. You've begun thinking like an investigator. Daniel unfolded a fresh map of the castle. We've questioned both attackers separately. They never met Ryan directly. They received instructions through intermediaries. Nathan examined the map. So the chain remains intact. Daniel pointed toward 3 marked locations: the messenger stable, the western warehouse, and the old chapel. Every courier connected to the conspiracy passed through at least one of these places. Nathan remained silent. Then his finger rested on the western warehouse. We watch it. No arrests. No searches. We wait. Charlotte looked surprised. You think someone will return? Nathan nodded. People hiding secrets always believe they're the only ones capable of protecting them. If Chamber 17 remains untouched, they'll eventually retrieve what's still missing. Later that afternoon, Nathan deliberately announced a public hunting expedition for the following morning. The declaration spread quickly throughout the castle. Nobles discussed it openly. Servants repeated it in every hallway. Ryan Cooper heard the announcement while reviewing military reports. He looked toward the royal messenger. The king leaves tomorrow? Yes, my lord. Western Forest. Ryan dismissed the messenger with a calm smile. Only after the door closed did his expression change. Too soon. Nathan had nearly been killed once already. Why travel again? Something felt wrong. Yet refusing to act would mean abandoning months of preparation. Ryan walked toward his writing desk. He removed a blank sheet of parchment. Instead of writing words, he drew 3 small symbols: a split wolf, a black feather, a single circle. He folded the paper and sealed it with dark blue wax. One quiet knock sounded at his office door. Enter. A young courier stepped inside and bowed. Ryan handed him the sealed message. Take this to the western warehouse. No one must see you. The courier accepted the letter and disappeared into the corridor. Far above, hidden behind the carved stone balcony overlooking the main hall, Charlotte watched the exchange unfold. She had been delivering clean linens to the royal offices when she recognized the same blue wax stain she had seen on the captured assassin's sleeve. Without thinking, she quietly followed the courier from a distance. He moved quickly through the lower corridors, across the stable yard, past the abandoned chapel. Finally, toward the western warehouse exactly as Nathan had predicted. Charlotte stopped behind a stack of old barrels. The courier glanced around carefully before slipping inside. Only seconds later, another figure emerged from the opposite alley. Not Ryan. Not one of his guards. A richly dressed noble wearing a heavy winter cloak. Charlotte recognized him instantly. Lord Benjamin Ashford, one of the king's oldest advisors. She felt her breath catch. The conspiracy had just become even larger than anyone had imagined. As Lord Ashford accepted Ryan's sealed message and disappeared into the warehouse without a single witness noticing, Charlotte realized the Alpha King's most dangerous enemies were no longer hiding outside Blackwood Castle. They were sitting beside him at his own council table. The moment betrayal reaches the council table, every loyal face becomes a question. Charlotte remained hidden behind the stacked barrels long after Lord Benjamin Ashford disappeared into the western warehouse. The cold air cut through her thin sleeves. She barely noticed. Benjamin Ashford had advised the crown for more than 20 years. He had attended royal funerals, signed military treaties, held Nathan's confidence through wars, famines, and succession disputes. If he stood beside Ryan Cooper, then the conspiracy was not a wound inside Blackwood Castle. It was a disease. Charlotte waited until the warehouse door closed completely before retreating through the alley. She did not run. Running drew attention. She walked with the same measured pace she used when carrying tea through crowded halls. Only after reaching the old chapel did she find Captain Daniel Hayes waiting inside. He stepped from behind a stone pillar. You were followed? I don't think so. What did you see? Charlotte told him everything. The courier, the blue wax, the western warehouse, Lord Benjamin Ashford. Daniel's expression hardened with each sentence. Are you certain? I served him at council dinners for 2 years. I know his face. The captain looked toward the chapel doors. This changes everything. Minutes later, they entered Nathan's private study through the hidden passage beneath the eastern staircase. The Alpha King listened in silence. Not once did he interrupt. When Charlotte finished, Nathan walked toward the fire and stared into the flames. Benjamin stood beside my father before I was born. Daniel remained still. That may be why no one questioned him. Nathan turned. No arrest. Charlotte looked surprised. He has Ryan's message. Exactly. Nathan approached the map. If we arrest him now, the remaining conspirators scatter. He placed one black marker beside the western warehouse. We let him believe he remains unseen. Daniel nodded slowly. And then, we call the full council tomorrow. Charlotte understood first. You want everyone in one room. Nathan looked at her. Everyone who believes they still control the kingdom. The following evening, the great hall filled beneath the silver banners of House Brooks. Nobles arrived in ceremonial cloaks. Generals stood beside regional lords. Ryan Cooper took his usual place behind Nathan's chair. Lord Benjamin Ashford sat near the center of the council table, calm and dignified. Charlotte moved between them carrying a silver tea service. No one paid attention to her. Exactly as planned. Nathan began with ordinary matters. Winter grain, border patrols, merchant taxes. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. Ryan gradually relaxed. Benjamin spoke twice. Both times, his voice remained steady. Then Nathan placed one sealed parchment onto the table. I received new intelligence this morning. Several nobles shifted in their seats. Ryan did not move. Benjamin smiled faintly. Concerning the Eastern ambush? Nathan nodded. Concerning those who financed it. Silence spread through the hall. Charlotte approached Benjamin's place setting. As she poured tea, she noticed something beneath the cuff of his expensive cloak. Dark blue wax. Fresh. The same wax used on Ryan's message. Benjamin saw her looking. Their eyes met. Only for a heartbeat. Then his hand closed around her wrist beneath the table. Hard. Pain shot through her arm. His smile never changed. Careful, girl. His whisper was almost gentle. You've already survived more than you should have. Charlotte's breath caught. She did not pull away. Instead, she deliberately tipped the silver teapot. Hot tea spilled across Benjamin's documents. He released her instantly and rose in anger. You clumsy fool. Every face turned toward them. Charlotte stepped back. The soaked parchment on Benjamin's table began to unfold. A hidden note slipped from beneath it and landed on the stone floor. Ryan's split wolf symbol appeared clearly beside 3 written names. The great hall became perfectly silent. Benjamin stared at the note, then at Charlotte. He understood too late. The maid had not spilled the tea by accident. Nathan slowly rose from his chair. His eyes settled on the evidence lying between them. Interesting. Benjamin's face lost its color. Because in front of the entire council, the kingdom's most trusted advisor had just revealed the secret message he was never supposed to possess. The guilty rarely destroy themselves with lies. They destroy themselves when the truth arrives before they have time to invent one. No one spoke. The hidden message lay on the polished stone floor of the great hall, soaked with tea but still perfectly readable. Ryan Cooper's split wolf symbol. 3 coded names. A delivery mark matching the blue wax found on the assassins. Every noble stared at the parchment. Lord Benjamin Ashford remained frozen beside the council table. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly. Nathan Brooks stepped down from the raised platform where the Alpha King traditionally presided. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. He simply bent down, lifted the damp parchment, and studied it for several silent seconds. Then he looked at Benjamin. Would you explain why this message was hidden beneath your council papers? Benjamin recovered quickly. His decades of experience serving the crown showed immediately. I have never seen that document before. Nathan nodded. I expected that answer. Benjamin continued calmly. The maid spilled tea. The paper must have fallen from someone else's table. Several nobles exchanged uncertain glances. The explanation sounded possible. Charlotte quietly stepped forward. If I may, Your Majesty. Nathan turned toward her. You may? Charlotte looked directly at Benjamin. My lord, when I poured your tea, your left hand was holding my wrist beneath the table. Benjamin's expression remained controlled. So, you couldn't have placed the paper there after the spill. The document was already hidden beneath your records. Benjamin answered immediately. You're mistaken. Charlotte shook her head. No. She pointed toward the soaked parchment. The upper edge is dry. The lower half absorbed the tea. If it had fallen afterward, the entire page would be wet. Silence spread once again. Several council members leaned forward. Nathan unfolded the document completely. Charlotte was right. Only the exposed portion carried fresh stains. The hidden section remained dry. Benjamin's breathing slowed. He understood the mistake. Nathan continued without emotion. This morning, a courier delivered Ryan Cooper's sealed message to the Western warehouse. Benjamin said nothing. Nathan placed another document beside the first. The courier has already confessed where he delivered it. Ryan finally spoke. This proves nothing. Nathan turned toward him. No. Captain Daniel Hayes entered through the great doors. Behind him walked the two captured assassins under heavy guard. Their hands remained bound. The older assassin looked across the chamber. His eyes stopped immediately on Benjamin. Then, on Ryan. Recognition flashed across all three faces before anyone could hide it. Daniel saw it. So did every noble present. Nathan asked only one question. Do you know these men? Ryan answered first. No. Benjamin followed. I've never seen them. Nathan nodded slowly. Daniel reached into a leather satchel and removed the bronze ring recovered from one attacker. He placed it beside Benjamin's family seal. The engraved crests matched perfectly. Benjamin stared at the ring. For the first time, confidence disappeared from his face. Nathan's voice remained steady. The attackers carried your family's signet. No explanation. Benjamin searched desperately for words. Before he could speak, the older assassin suddenly laughed. A tired, hopeless laugh. He still thinks he can lie. Ryan's eyes widened. Silence. The prisoner ignored him. We were promised payment through Lord Ashford. The beta arranged the routes. The warehouse stored the gold. Every sentence struck the chamber like a hammer. Benjamin closed his eyes. Ryan's jaw tightened. Nathan watched both men without satisfaction. Only certainty. The conspiracy had finally broken. Not because of torture. Not because of spies. But because one maid had noticed details everyone else ignored. Charlotte looked across the great hall. The same nobles who had never learned her name now stared at her with stunned disbelief. Nathan stepped forward until he stood beside her. Then, before the entire royal council, he spoke the words no one in Blackwood Castle would ever forget. The kingdom was not saved by rank. It was saved by the courage of the one person everyone believed was too unimportant to matter. No one argued. Because every person in that hall now knew it was true. The final victory of a kingdom is not the moment traitors fall. It is the moment those who were ignored are finally seen. 3 weeks passed before Blackwood Castle felt peaceful again. Ryan Cooper and Lord Benjamin Ashford were tried before the full royal court. Every ledger from Chamber 17 was examined. Every payment traced. Every coded message translated. The captured assassins testified. The missing stable worker was found alive in an abandoned hunting lodge beyond the eastern ridge. One by one, the conspiracy collapsed beneath the weight of its own records. Titles were stripped. Estates were seized. The nobles who had financed the ambush were removed from the council. For years, they had hidden behind wealth, rank, and trusted names. None of those things protected them from the truth. Charlotte Bennett expected life to return to normal. She returned to the servants' wing before sunrise. She folded linens, replaced candles, polished silver cups. She wore the same gray dress and white apron she had worn on the morning she slipped the warning beneath the Alpha King's plate. Yet the castle no longer treated her as invisible. Guards greeted her by name. Servants stepped aside with quiet respect. Even nobles who had once looked through her now lowered their heads when she passed. Charlotte found the attention uncomfortable. She had never wanted importance. She had only wanted the king to survive. One winter morning, Captain Daniel Hayes entered the laundry room while she arranged fresh sheets. The king requests you in the great hall. Charlotte looked down at her apron. Now, Daniel smiled faintly. Exactly as you are. When Charlotte entered the hall, she stopped near the doors. The entire court had gathered. Military commanders stood beside household servants. Merchants, craftsmen, and regional leaders filled the long chamber beneath the silver banners of House Brooks. Nathan waited before the throne. He wore no battle armor. Only a dark royal cloak fastened with the silver wolf crest. Charlotte approached slowly. She bowed. My king. Nathan raised one hand before she could kneel. Stand. The word echoed through the hall. Charlotte straightened. Nathan unfolded the small warning note she had written weeks earlier. Its edges were worn from being handled repeatedly. He held it where the court could see. 2 sentences changed the fate of this kingdom. His gaze moved across the assembled nobles. Your beta sold you out. They're in position. No one spoke. Nathan continued. Charlotte Bennett had no title, no soldiers, no authority. She possessed only the truth and enough courage to place it in my hand. He stepped toward her. She was followed, threatened, hunted. Still, she refused to abandon this kingdom. A royal attendant approached carrying a small silver box. Nathan opened it. Inside rested a delicate brooch shaped like a wolf guarding a folded parchment. He fastened it gently to Charlotte's apron. This mark represents loyal counsel to the crown. From this day forward, Charlotte Bennett will serve as a royal observer within Blackwood Castle. Any servant may bring concerns to her without fear of punishment. No warning will be dismissed because it comes from someone of low rank. Charlotte stared at him. "You are giving me authority?" Nathan shook his head. "You already earned it." Applause began among the servants. Then the guards joined. Finally, the nobles rose. The sound filled the great hall until Charlotte could barely hear her own breathing. Tears gathered in her eyes. Not because she had been elevated, because every quiet worker standing along the walls now understood that their voices could matter too. Nathan looked toward the court one final time. Remember this. A crown does not make truth more valuable. Rank does not make loyalty more pure. The person standing closest to the danger may be the one everyone else has chosen not to see. Later, Charlotte returned to the council table. She placed fresh tea before Nathan exactly as she had on that first morning. This time he looked up. "Thank you, Charlotte." She smiled. Not as an invisible maid, not as someone seeking honor, simply as the woman whose folded note had saved a king, exposed a betrayal, and taught an entire kingdom that courage often enters the room wearing an ordinary apron.